we need another Scottish voice in here to take over, Judy.
I know.
The book's here, The Wild Card. You know, I am surprised that you sat down for long enough to write a book because you're always all over the place.
I didn't sit down all that long. I can do about 45 minutes at a time, and then that's my limit. I get bored and I have to get up and do something. But yeah, I got into that during COVID because Anton Dubek, who I danced with, well, he danced, I kind of followed along. During COVID, he phoned me up and he said, I've done a novel set in the ballroom dancing world. Can I send you it, a proof copy, and would you let me know what you think? I wasn't doing anything, it was lockdown. So it came, I loved it, and I went through it with my little red pen and I made notes. You know,
it sounded like you were quite strict.
I did it properly. You know, I'm a grammar geek, vocabulary geek. I love reading and I love English language. So, yeah, I was probably his worst nightmare. He didn't know that. I was going to
say, probably just wanted to come back and say, yes, great, Anton.
That's exactly what he did. I sent it back with all my little turned-down pages. And he phoned me up and he goes, could you not just have said, well done, Anton, that was brilliant.
But the tables are turned.
I love that.
But that kind of inspired you to think, well, I could do the same with the tennis world because you've got so much experience.
What I said to him about what I loved about it was the behind the scenes of the ballroom dancing world. And anybody who knows him, he's a complete geek of the history of ballroom dancing. He's fascinating. But his novels were set in the Second World War when ballroom dancers had a huge status in hotels and cruise ships and society. And I said, I loved all the behind-the-scenes stuff and all the rest. And he said, well, why don't you think about writing one that's set in the tennis world? And they say you should only write about what you know. And I was thinking, oh, there you go.
Your heroine is a young woman who has, you know, particular struggles in the tennis world, particularly with a slightly malevolent coach, dare I say, and things. And obviously, everyone says the first novel tends to be autobiographical. So how much of it is based on your experience, Judy?
I think it's a lot of what I've seen and heard and probably witnessed.
And campaigned about.
Over many, many years. And the thing with fiction, I realised, was that there is an opportunity to raise awareness of all sorts of issues that exist for women in the sporting world without pointing a finger at anybody directly. And so the issue of abuse of power in sport, you know, I think especially in a sport like tennis, which is an individual sport, you know, you are an independent contractor at the top end of the game and you're responsible for hiring your coach. Nobody hires them for you. Nobody vets them. It's entirely up to you. So whereas if you're in a team sport, the club or the national team takes care of all of that.
But even in the case of Simone Biles, who we all talked about on this programme a few weeks ago with that amazing documentary that came out, you know, that's more of a team business, I suppose, in a way, but you can see how badly abuse, you know, can be performed and makes an impact on...
Yeah, that had a huge impact on me bringing that in because she and the other gymnasts were eventually brave enough and mature enough to be able to take that to court. But when it happened to them, they were very young. And when you're young, you're not mature enough, you're not strong enough, you're frightened, you're ashamed, you're embarrassed, you're all of these things.
You shouldn't have to.
And who do you talk to? Because you're scared of losing your funding or your place in a team. And you know, there needs to be much stronger safeguarding, and there probably is now, as a bit like shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted. But that really brought it into
So how did you feel?
Spotlight.
Because both Andy and Jamie went off abroad really quite young, didn't they? Sort of 12, 13, 14. I mean, how did that feel for you?
Well, I think when Andy went to Barcelona, he was just over 15. And actually he really wanted to go. It was Rafa Nadal's fault. Rafa and he were playing racquetball at some tournament, and he comes on the phone to me later on that night, you know, beep, 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 international call from Andorra, would you pay for it? Yeah, OK. I thought he'd lost his passport, that would be the norm. And he said, oh, Mum, I've been playing racquetball with Rafa, and do you know what he does? He trains in Mallorca, in the sunshine, he gets to hit with Carlos Moya, he doesn't go to school, and he was ranting, and I was holding the phone like this, and I was going, this is great, because I knew he had exhausted what we had in Scotland, but it had to be his decision. He had to, and he said, I need to go to Spain. So we went and looked and we made it happen. But where he went to, the academy was part of a big club, so there were lots of normal people around. It wasn't just a hothouse. And it was right beside Barcelona Airport. And there was a Globe span, which is now defunct, a direct flight, 2 hours 4 days a week from Edinburgh or Glasgow. It was easy to get there.
But were you
it was easy
worried?
to get him back.
I mean, like, for example, Kirsty also just got into terrible sort of, well, social media storm at least for saying that she was going to let her son, or did let her son, go interrailing at 15. I mean, did you have fears about sort of them being out in the wider world at that vulnerable teenage time? Do you think it's different for boys, perhaps?
Yeah, I don't think I did, in that, you know, it was an academy with, it had an American high school on site, a small franchise of one. It had dormitories and so forth on site. It was properly vetted on the schooling, on the pastoral care,
So
and on the tennis. It was completely different. So it was like going to a boarding school that specialised in tennis, really. So it was quite different from that. But I think it's that, for me, it was he has an opportunity right now to do this, and you can always go back to schooling and everything later on. So, and I didn't ever feel like we were that far away.
But it's that sliding doors moment that we were talking about. I mean, the rest is history, of course. He went on to great success. I mean, as a fellow Scot, Scotland's still in mourning that Andy's not out on the tour, but it had to happen. How did it feel when he finally said, how did he tell you that he was going to retire?
He said he was thinking about making this year his last season, and probably Wimbledon his last tournament. I think, you know, for some time he'd been struggling with injury. I think he was world #1 when he got the hip injury that eventually needed a metal hip. And he worked so hard for so many years to try to give himself a chance to get back to the top of the game. And remarkably, he managed to do that. But it was, I think, from that moment, for me, was all just stress of if something's going to go wrong again, because it's the expectation, of course, is huge from all sorts of quarters. But I didn't enjoy the last 5 years one bit, and I think that you've got your heart in your mouth every time he's playing. And this year he had a lot of tough injuries. They rolled the ankle, ended up with back surgery just before Wimbledon. But he managed to play Wimbledon doubles with Jamie, which is a wonderful way to finish Wimbledon, playing with your brother.
Yeah.
And then, of course, he managed Olympics. And I was really glad that Jamie was out there with him, because I think that would have been emotionally incredibly tough to be standing out there by yourself. And then, you know, when he played Olympics, and he was playing with Dan Evans, who's every bit as patriotic as Andy, and the two of them, they were like kids, weren't they? You know, all these match points that they saved, and
it was
the
a
remarkable comeback.
Finale,
it was the perfect finale for him, and part of the team.
Judy, we've got to go, but thank you.
Yeah, thank
really
you.
nice to have you.
Lovely.